What can you do?
Rabbi, do you know whatever becomes of these?
Those films? They get recorded over every week.
There's no film in
my
there.
friend Marcy.
There's no film.
There's nothing. It's only for show.
Remember my
Yeah,
friend
well, yeah.
She would love it.
Fine.
But where can she access it?
It's called Rabbi Wax. They should be. They're
Rabbi
supposed to be
Wax.
uploaded or downloaded, or whatever the right loaded word is,
On the website.
on the website. If they are, I have no idea.
Because I did check a while ago.
I don't. I see. I probably should look, but I don't look. So
He'll be back.
But that they're supposed to be? Okay.
I imagine. I don't know what. I don't think Rabbi Wax is using them for his private art. What's this one? All right. Okay, we ready?
We are.
Okay, we got a long journey tonight. You'll tell me how complicated you want me to get at the end, because we'll see how it goes. Anyway, the beginning of the portion starts off with Abraham. He had his circumcision. He was 99 years old. Pretty big deal, really, because he circumcised himself and his whole household. A pretty big deal. But evidently, this is the mitzvah which defined him as Jew. And it's very important to understand what's going on over here. We didn't have a chance to get into it last week, what exactly is the mitzvah of circumcision. But it's a very interesting mitzvah, because what was he before circumcision? We talked about last week that Judaism is way beyond monotheism. Judaism is unityism. Excellent. I like it, because this defines everything, by the way, because our job is to reflect the unity of Hashem with all that we have. That is the essence of the mission, at least the way I think I understand it.
So you're saying we're Unitarians?
Yes, we are Unitarians. That's exactly right. We are Junitarians, if I may. So the question is, what was he before Bris Milah? What was he? He obviously had adopted the mission already, but what was he in halachic or even theological or ethical terms? Because you can argue that he wasn't still Jewish here. One can argue, and some actually do, that there is no such thing as a Jewish people until there's a Jewish people, or until Torah, or until something like that. But certainly there was a change of status at the time of his Bris Milah. So what exactly is Bris Milah, and how does it fit the mission? And we always like the mission of unityism. How does it fit that mission, and why it's such an important mitzvah? And everybody's so giddy and so happy about it. The Bris Milah. And again, we have to understand, I think, that it's either a mitzvah or it's mutilation. Because you're going to tell me that doctors say it's physically beneficial. Some years they do. Some years they don't. Some years they don't know. And it certainly was never always that way, that people thought that there was some physical benefits to circumcision. So it's either a mitzvah or mutilation. And just like in some parts of the world there is female circumcision, which we're horrified at, right? Well, I agree it's vastly different in scope, and I understand that. But what do we do to kids? We take an 8-day-old boy and we cut him. I mean, now it might not be
unbelievable experience, especially when you do it.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's you actually.
Yes, I did.
I would not do it. I would have fainted. Have I?
Under rabbinic supervision.
Under rabbinic supervision.
Of course.
I know, but I wouldn't have done it. I believe it. Good thing to have those moil people.
Everybody else was the other side of the room.
I wouldn't do it. But whatever the case may be, it's a mitzvah. And if it's not a mitzvah, it's mutilation, because we're not argue there's a physical benefit, fine. But what is it? What is Bris Milah? And everybody's so happy about it. And it's interesting that the mitzvahs that the Jewish people were Moser Nefesh on, had a great deal of self-sacrifice for, that's the mitzvahs Jews do today. There's two mitzvahs that almost all Jews do, or at least are aware of. If they don't do it, it's almost like a conscience not doing of it. The two mitzvahs that all Jews know, or at least are aware of, maybe three, but there's two that they certainly do: Passover. So even if people don't have any idea what Passover is about, but they know about the Seder, and they might have a ham sandwich with their matzah, but at least they'll have a Seder. They might, and I don't know, but I'm not denigrating it, but they know about the Seder. And also they know about Bris Milah. If a Jewish person decides consciously not to circumcise their child, it's a conscious decision. It's not a decision almost always based on non-knowledge. So the question is, what is this circumcision, and why would the Jewish people have such a sense of self-sacrifice? We just circumcise our children in basements, and Jews went out of their way to make sure that, so go ahead.
Does it have any physical benefits?
It might. You can argue it does, but it's certainly not the reason we. Every year they say something. I can bring you the litany of benefits that doctors say, but I'd be talking in the presence of genius. Well, no, there are those modest genius. There are those. I mean, there are those that say that it helps prevent cervical cancer in women. There are those that say that it prevents certain infections. There are those that say it helps prevent HIV. There might be a litany of physical benefits, but even if there are, they never knew about them, right? And like we always say, if a mitzvah has physical benefits, ma tov v'na'im, how wonderful it is. I'll take it. Doesn't mean that we don't do it for the mitzvah.
There's no research facts.
There are research you can argue back and forth. But whether it is physically beneficial or not is not relevant because we did it for thousands of years before any knowledge of its physical benefit.
Probably didn't have clinical trials.
I don't know. Anyways, so the point. So we're getting into the question is what is circumcision. So we know that because this is definitional, and this is going to head into this week's portion. This is definitional in the fact that when Hashem said in last week's portion, "Helech lefanai," ani kel shakai, I am kel shakai. My name is kel shakai. Helech lefanai, walk in front of me. Hey, somebody be complete. And then he gave them the mitzvah of circumcision. So the question everybody asks, why did God use, vis-a-vis the mitzvah of circumcision, introducing the mitzvah of circumcision with his name, Kel Shakai? What does that word mean? So Kel Shakai means, as Rashi brings in a couple places from the Talmud, I said, Anihu, I'm the one, Sha'amar la'olam dai, who said to the world, dai, it is sufficient. Shalimale amro, had I not said, la'olam dai, that it is sufficient, the world will continuously create new things. So the word shin, shad kai, which is dalad yud, means anihu sha'amar, that I said la'olam dai, to the world it is sufficient, which is very, very interesting. You don't see new things being created. It's very. We all should have on us not yet useful appendages. You ever wonder that? Where is the not yet useful appendage? It should be like a stub of an arm growing out of here, and another eyeball in the back of the head, so you wouldn't have, huh? Well, appendix is not going to be useful. It is said to be getting unuseful, even though it is useful. But there is no.
Useful?
Yeah.
Again, the doctor can comment. Yeah.
That's the surgeon's kids through college.
That's exactly right. So it's like I went to the dentist today. I walked in. He called his travel agent for a trip to the Bahamas. But
Surgeon's kids through college.
Yeah. But the point is, there should be billions of soon-to-be useful appendages or creations and new things being created. Hashem said, no, the world just exists the way it is. No things are not being created. What does that have to do with circumcision? Because we've learned, and we can go through the whole speech, we've learned this many, many times. A synonym, what is a mitzvah? So define it in English. It's not no surprise, a good deed, a commandment, a moral value.
Limitation.
Excellent. See, you're listening from last year. What all mitzvahs, all morality is limits on behavior. All morality is limits on behavior. Anytime you do a moral act, you're limiting your behavior, either positive or negative. So if you say, I'm going to give charity, you're doing a moral good, but you limit yourself from using that money for something else. It's a limit on your behavior. You say, I'm not going to speak lashon hara, I'm not going to gossip. So you're limiting your behavior. All morality is limits. And we know that those limits ultimately free us, but that all morality is limits. So therefore, what bris milah is a sign of the adaptation of limits on human behavior. Which is why it is on the place where it is, where one would suppose that is the part of the body which we have least control over, or want to have least control over. Yet that's where the bris milah is, to show that Judaism is limits. I am the one who says to the world, it is sufficient. I will tell you not only how vast the world should expand, but the sphere of your activities. I will limit them to the moral sphere. Your adaptation of that ideal is evidenced by the bris milah. That is what bris milah is. It's a wondrous explanation. And therefore, it represents all of Judaism. It represents the willingness to limit behavior. If we can limit behavior in the place where it's ostensibly the most unlimited, we can limit behavior anywhere, and therefore it stands for the willingness to adopt the concept of unityism, of the giving over of all of self to the limits on behavior, either positive or negative, that Hashem has set down for us. There is the one question, again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. I think the last year, 2 years, my notes said we spent a lot of time on this issue, but it's worthwhile to explain why women don't have a commensurate symbol on their body. If it's so important to be marked as a Jew, why wouldn't women have a commensurate symbol? So evidently, it's not important to be marked as a Jew. Because half the Jewish people are not marked as a Jew. So it can't be all that important. Right? I mean, what does it mean? But yet, Bris Milah is one of the biggest mitzvahs that we literally, Jews will self-sacrifice for. So what Bris Milah stands for is the adaptation of a code of conduct. It's an evidence of the soul within. That's what it is. So in a woman whose prime, not soul role, is the internal world, and on a man whose prime, not soul role, is the external world, the man is marked in the external world, and the woman's soul has a natural limit to it, which is what's either called tzniut, privacy, or Sarah Imenu. There are those who translate, everybody says Sarah, Mother Sarah's name was Sarah, meaning the princess, or my princess, Sarai. Others understand that the word Sarah comes from the word measure. She was already internally measured. She didn't need the outer symbol. Her soul was already stamped in the inner world with what she needed to understand the limits on her behavior. Man who's in the outer world, prime, requires an outer world symbol. And therefore that's the balance. It's not so much the symbol, it's what it represents, what it marks us as far as vis-a-vis the power of the Jewish soul. The woman have the inner role, the power's there. The man has to mark themselves because we're in the outer world, prime, not soul. That's what happened here. This answers, by the way, that's last week's portion at the end, but this answers for us a tremendous question that we have in the beginning of this week's portion. The beginning of this week's portion, let's just go through it just a little bit. So Abraham circumcised himself, and normally what do you do when you're circumcised at age 99? You lay around for a few days recuperating.
Have a little schnob.
A little snot, yeah, a little, some herring maybe, sure. whatever it takes to recuperate. Avram Avinu loved having guests so much he went outside. Now all the commentary, what?
Just, at circumcision, the mothers always cry.
Right.
We never hear anything about Abraham's mother.
We don't even know if she was alive anymore. He was 99 years old.
That, but even in the beginning, his father's mentioned, but never.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. Evidently she wasn't.
Not a mother. Like so many others.
Well, yes. Yeah, I would vouch to say, I'll research that, but he probably did have a mother. Right? It's a good question. I don't have an answer for it. I don't know anything about his mother. His father, by the way, Terach, I will tell you a factoid, which is just a factoid. It really has nothing to do with anything. But I'll tell you a factoid about, we'll come back to it a few minutes later. A factoid about Terach. 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, we asked the following question. Who was that masked man, Terach, that all the Jewish people came out of, and yet he was a Shmo Bagel idol worshiper? I mean, he was a bad man. I mean, I hate to say it about him. He couldn't have been a very good man. He brought his son to be thrown into a fire by the Nimrod, right? So, I mean, he couldn't have been a very good man. And he was the idol worshiper of his time. He had the franchise. So who was he that all the Jewish people come out of him? So I never have found a good answer for that. Except I did see yesterday, in the name of one of the great Kabbalistic Hasidic rabbis, the Shem Mishmuel, who says, we know the story of Eov. Mm-hmm. Eov is Job, who went through all those trials and tribulations of life. We'll come back to Eov in a few minutes. And that the soul of Terach was a Gilgal, was transmigrated into the soul of Eov, and therefore Eov's tribulations and his passing that trial was a tikkun, was rectification of the origin of the soul of the Jewish people. I thought it was a fascinating factoid. I don't have any proof to it. It's just a fascinating factoid. Just fascinating. Helps answer the question of how it could come out of somebody like Terach. But doesn't answer how it could come out of somebody like Terach's father. But anyways, so Abraham. So the Torah says Abraham's sitting in his tent. He goes outside to look for guests. And everybody says, wow, he went outside, it was so hot. To me, I never understand that idea too much. Because if you're sitting with no air conditioning, it's much cooler outside than it is inside a tent. I don't care how big of a tent you have, it's got to be cooler outside than it is inside. Maybe the sun isn't beating you, but anyway, and Hashem comes to visit him. Hashem says, and this is the first time God came to visit Abraham for no reason whatsoever. Every other time he came to visit Abraham was to tell him a message, to give, the nevuah prophecy. Here it was just through the mitzvah Bikur Cholim to visit the sick. Abraham is having a conniption over here. He has no guests. So down the road, he sees 3 men who were really angels that God sent, and Abraham says, "Excuse me, God, I got business. Business. It's nice to have you around. I got business." And he goes out and he takes care of the guests. Everybody asks, how could he do that? How could he leave the company of God and say, "Excuse me, I got business"? So there are a number of explanations, but one of them goes that he, once he was circumcised, he leaped up into a level where he knew the will of Hashem instinctively. That it caused this unbelievable leap in level of spirituality, that he actually was willing to go through the circumcision, and what it did to him, he became a pure vessel instead of a scarred vessel, even though he was scarred now, but now he was a full vessel, and therefore he was better able to intuit the will of Hashem, and he knew this is what Hashem wanted him to do. The corollary to that is that he became, not in God's terms, but in our terms, almost like Hashem. Because we learned last week that Hashem's giving is unique. Hashem gives because he's a giver, not because there's even a need. There's no need because there was no world, nobody was needy. Hashem is a giver. A giver gives. And we learned that our job as human beings, and certainly as Jews, is to take the baby who's a prime taker and make that person into a giver. And there are levels of giving. Most people give because they see a deficiency and they work to fix the deficiency. But that's not a giver. That's a merciful person. A giver is one who just gives. Even if there's no need, they just give. So Abraham needed to give. He had mirrored that image or that quality of Hashem to the extent he needed to give. And therefore, that is why Hashem created. That was Hashem's reason for creation. A giver gives. So he knew that Hashem would not stop him from giving at that moment in time. Because that's what he was. So when the people came walking down the road, he knew he had to give to them. That's enough stuff at the beginning. I just want to, there's so much more here. Yeah?
What are you saying? He was divine at that
No. He wasn't divine. He had emulated the midah, the quality of God, as much as is humanly possible. The quality of Hashem is, in creation is, that Hashem gives. The good does good. He had emulated that quality to do good, not because even there's no need. He's outside. I got to give. There's no need because nobody's walking on the road. He had to give. And Hashem allowed him to give, and because he had reached that level, as high as a human being could reach in that particular meter, that particular quality, he knew that he would be allowed to go out and fulfill that need that he had.
Did I hear you just say that Hashem has a need to give?
No, I when I talked about Hashem, I said just that he is a giver. When I talked about Abraham, I said he has a need. I specifically use different language in the two. Okay. So just one more thing about Abraham, and then we're going to move on to the binding of Isaac, the Akedah. We talked last week about the idea of the 10 nisyonos, the 10 tests of Abraham. We spoke about that the Torah taught us about those 10 tests in order that what those things did would be mushrush, would be rooted in our soul. That they literally root itself in our soul. That's what we talked about last week. And we talked about why we love Eretz Yisrael, because Abraham could have gone anywhere. He went to Temple Israel. Instead, he could have gone anywhere. So he went to Israel, and therefore we love Eretz Yisrael. It became part of us. Jewish people can give their lives for Judaism because Abraham was willing to be thrown into the kivshan eish, into the fire. So each one of those tests literally rooted in us, in our soul, a midah quality. And those are the idea behind the 10 nisyonos. And then we also understood that those 10 nisyonos, then tests, are to roll back the 10 expressions of creation so that we literally see God as if he is just creating the world where there's no doubt about our relationship with him. The 10 tests are in reverse order. The last of the 10 tests would reveal the beginning of creation. The last of the 10 tests was the binding of Isaac, reveals Hashem as the prime creator, because that's how much you have to understand to be able to do that. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. But the purpose of our lives is to meet the nisyonos, the tests of life. And let's examine that premise that the people tell us. We just mentioned before Eov. Eov was an unbelievable man. Eov was Job. Job had a wonderful life. He had a beautiful family and a beautiful wife and a big business. And he was big man on campus. And then he lost everything. He lost his whole family. He lost his business. He lost his health. And at the end of the struggles of Eov, the whole book is about his, asking questions, his friends discussing it with him. He ended up having a tremendous trust and belief in Hashem. So why don't we talk about God as the God of Eov, the God of Abraham, the God of Jacob? Why not the God of Eov, of Job? And the answer is that Eov passed his nisyonos, passed the tests of life, out of fear, out of awe. And Abraham passed them out of love. And the difference between the two is as follows. What's the difference? How you pass it? He ended up being a holy man. What's the difference? The difference is as follows. So let's say you have a job. You're working for somebody. And the guy next to you, your good buddy, is also working for somebody. One day, Mr. X comes into the room and says, I'm sorry, but business is going down. I have to let one of you go. And I flipped a coin because you're both great workers. I didn't have to choose. I flipped a coin, and you were chosen. I'm sorry, your job is over. So what most people will do, some people just go boiling mad and angry and hurt. A lot of people will be hurt by it, obviously. But most people will say, I understand, you've been a very good boss to me, and you go out and start crying. Go outside. But you take it like a man. You take it whatever, or whatever.
Unless you're a postal worker.
Yeah, right. And then you go postal. Right? That's all different story. This is the reaction. Your reaction should be, thank God that I was chosen to lose my job so that my friend still has his. That's accepting the trial with love, rather than accepting it out of, okay, what can I do? I'll be a mensch about it, There's a big difference. Abraham, these things, you have to do what came at him. Anything can happen when it came at him. And yet he accepted them with love. And the greatness of the tests of Abraham was his acceptance of them with love. And that's how come they became an integral part of the Jewish people, part of the soul of the Jewish people.
Just a factoid. I always wondered this. If you're employed, they say you have a job. Does that have anything to do with Job?
I don't know. Depends how bad your job is. No, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. That's beyond the purview of this discussion, as they say. So now we have to. Every time, many of us have been born, and we were raised to do good things, right? We're raised to do mitzvahs. Our parents taught us do mitzvahs. How much credit do we get for mitzvahs that are like just natural to us? Oh, we get credit for sure. But there's nothing in those mitzvahs which is against what we were raised as. So, okay, so somebody, you're raised, your parents brought you to synagogue every week, so you go to synagogue. That's what you do. And the main thing about a mitzvah is the intent behind the mitzvah. That's what makes the mitzvah into something spectacular. So what happened over here, Abraham not only did right, he was spectacular in what he did. And there's one more thing about this, and that is, just make sure I don't get it. Okay, there are two types of nisyonos of life. There's one type of nisyonos of the natural life cycle of life. And I'll give you some examples. One example, classic of a life cycle. A tough example to talk about. But everybody expects that their parents will pass before them. That's what your parents want. They want to live their life, a long life, and then pass, and then you live your long life, and nobody wants the other way around. So as hard as it is when a parent passes away, and we all know it's very, very difficult, but it's something you can't say was out of the realm of your natural expectations. Now it's also true, and forgive me for a moment, please, I know it'll be a little bit of a hard discussion, that every married couple knows when they get married that one of them will die before the other one. They don't know which one, but they know. So when it happens, except if it happens suddenly without any warning, but generally, it's not out of the realm of natural expectation. And it's still an unbelievably difficult test of faith and of love to get through it properly. But you can prepare for those. And we do, because we expect that our parents will pass before us. I mean, it's a very tough conversation, but we expect that, so we can prepare for it. What you can't prepare for is the train that comes out in a tunnel and smacks you upside the head. That you can't prepare for. God promised you go down to a new land, everything will be good, you get there, there's a famine. You can't prepare for that. The tests that are the train out of the tunnel tests. And at that moment when that train hits, you don't have all your intellectual constructs that you prepared for. You don't have all your philosophical geniuses that you prepared for. You have none of that. That all goes away. All you got left is the instinct that you developed in yourself. And you developed instinct yourself by mysterious nefesh, by sense of self-sacrifice along the way. You don't just develop instincts because you have instincts. You develop instincts as a sense of self-sacrifice. And then when the test hits, you can see how you pass it. One last thing on this, and this I think is vital for everybody. I wish I could spread this. I hope if I spread it far enough, some rabbi won't tell me it's not true. But I think it's true. Remember, if we are right in our presumption that what Abraham did, put midos, put qualities into the soul of his children, some of these tests happened after his children were born. Isaac was already born. So how can you change the genetics of your child after they're born? And the answer is you can't in physical genetics, but you can in spiritual genetics. It must be the answer. So you want your kids to be holier, you act with self-sacrifice in the mitzvahs you do. Grab a mitzvah that's a self-sacrifice, you'll change the soul of your children. Serious, I love my children. I give to my children. You give to your children by changing their soul for the better. Now, it might happen, it might work in a child, but it'll work in a grandchild. Because this is what you're doing. So that's what Abraham did. He was mashrish. He rooted midos, qualities, in the soul of his child after his child was born. Couldn't change the physical genealogy or the gene pool of his child anymore. But evidently the spiritual pool can still be changed after a person is born. So I think that was an unbelievable idea. And we can spend all night on the middle of the portion. But I wanted to spend the rest of the night on and I'll see how far you guys actually want to go with this. And that is on the end of the portion where we have the seminal event of Jewish history, one of the seminal events of Jewish history, and that is the Akedah, the binding of Yitzchak. There's so much to talk about here, it's phenomenal. So first we have to know how vital this is in world thought. Because you know that our Ishmaelite cousins now tell us that it wasn't Isaac who was brought up the mountain, it was Ishmael. Let's back off on this, let's tell the story a little bit. Abraham now has a child, Isaac. Isaac is 37 years old. And then Hashem appears to him and says, Abraham, kachna bincha, please take your son. Asher ahavta, the one that you love, is Yitzchak. In the conversation, the Talmud tells us, Hashem said to him, kachna bincha, take your son. Abraham said, I have two sons. Asher ahavta, the one you love. Which is a classic. He says, I love both of them. Right? I always tell my grandchildren, which one of you love the most? The one that's standing in front of me at that moment. That's the one. You're it. Yeah, okay, that's it. And then, and it's Yitzchak. Take Yitzchak. And the reason for that process, among other reasons, the Talmud tells us, is to awaken Abraham's love for his child, so the test would be more intense. So, and so Abraham wakes up the next morning, gathers with him wood for the fire, to offer up Isaac as his son, as an offering. He brings along Yishmael, his other son, his older son, and Eliezer, his faithful servant, and they head up towards Israel, towards Mount Moriah, towards what's ended up being the Temple Mount. And along the way, the Satan, the negative forces, do everything to convince Abraham to turn back. The rivers rise, the desert gets bigger. Turn back, this is a stupid idea. Abraham gets to the mountain. He asks his children, what do you see? The Medrash says. Ishmael and Eliezer didn't see anything, so he left them behind. Yitzchak saw the holiness of the Temple Mount. He took them up the mountain, and the Talmud says they went up the mountain together. It says it 2 or 3 times. They went up together. And in the middle of the walk up, Isaac asks his son, says, Dad. Remember, he's 37 years old at the time. Dad, Tati, Abba, whichever word he used. He said, where's the sheep?
Yeah.
So his father, and again, the Talmud says he was well aware of what was going on, and this was to awaken again, to intensify the test of his father. His father said, don't worry, there's a sheep up there, or an ayil, a ram up there. He gets up there, Isaac offers to be bound. He says, Abba, Tati, bind me, tie me. And the reason for to be tied is that he didn't want to flinch as the knife was being drawn, because if he would move, it could render the shechita, the process of slaughtering, as puzzle, as improper, and then invalidate the offering. So he asked to be bound. Abraham is ready, literally takes the knife, brings it down to the neck of Yitzchak, and a voice comes out from Shemaim, Avraham, Avraham, Abraham, Abraham, because he didn't listen the first time. Atishlach yodcha lanar, don't touch that young man. 37 years old, young man, don't touch that young man. Atas lobu, don't do him any damage whatsoever. What's the double expression? He says, don't harm, it says, do not send forth your arm against this person. Abraham said, okay, I'm not allowed to kill him, let me cut him. I don't want to kill him, let me at least cut him. Atas lomu, don't do any damage to him. And then Abraham said, but I need to do something. So he says, don't worry, I have a ram in the bushes, which he didn't notice until then. Ready for you, he offered the ram. We learned that that's the shofar of Rosh Hashanah. The left shofar is the shofar that God blew at Sinai. The right shofar is the shofar of Mashiach. We learned all that before. So that's the basic story. That's the basic event. And when we know that this has been usurped by our Ishmaelite cousins, who took them 2,700 years to figure out that it was not Isaac who went up the mountain, it was Ishmael. As it says in the Quran, we were not telling the truth for 2,700 years. Our other cousins also usurped this. I was once in on a business trip in Virginia. You have to understand, Virginia is in the South, and Southern TV is significantly different than Northern TV. You have to understand this. So I still remember my sin. Flipped on the TV, and half the stations were preachers. Now, had I had a sinus infection, I could have had it cured. And I kid thee not, that was one of the big. I remember this guy saying, somebody called the preacher from Timbuktu, and he said, I have a sinus infection. He says, I'll send you a prayer cloth, we'll pray together, and your sinuses will be cured. This is true, I'm not making this up. But I said, but then there was a station, actually had somebody preaching. I probably shouldn't have listened. But I said, okay, why did I listen? I wanted to see if there was any wisdom. It was just preacher. Was there any chachma, any wisdom there in the preaching? Like it was like a sheer, or it was just like somebody just. And he was preaching about the Akedah, and the whole speech he was jumping around the stage saying the blood of the lamb, the blood of. What was he doing? He was saying he was equating this somehow to Yashka, and it was almost like taking this was like Yashka being offered. So again, they're trying to take the event because the event is such a phenomenal, game-changing event. What was game-changing? Let's just go through some of the game-changingness of this. Number one, he have to kill his son. This is not simple. This is not simple at all. I mean, it's astounding.
He killed his wife also.
His wife would have. I mean, that's a corollary. Yeah. He didn't kill his wife, but you're right. She died. Right. But let's just walk through the thing. The second thing is whole life work is now down the drain. What's he been preaching for the past 50 years? Be good, be nice, be kind, be decent, that's all gone. Who are you to preach to me? You killed your son. Who are you to preach to me? So his life work is gone. It's all gone. Right? His family. How could he have lived with Sarah afterwards? I mean, who knows? Maybe they could have, but everything is